official podcast of the Jacksonville Public Library.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Hurley.
Welcome back, everyone. It's a fabulous Monday here in Jacksonville, Florida.
It is. It's a beautiful Monday, if I may say so myself. And we had a great time at Art Walk last month, didn't we, Jenna?
Ooh, yeah. Art Walk is, if you haven't been to Art Walk at the main library in downtown Jacksonville, then you're definitely missing out.
It's seriously groovy.
It is pretty groovy. And honestly, it was groovy this past Art Walk because we actually had a jazz band here in the library.
That is what I was alluding to when I used the word groovy.
Look at
That's
you.
exactly who I was thinking of.
Oh.
Yeah, it got jazzy in here.
Oh, man, I was dancing. I'm not going to lie, you guys.
Yeah.
It was a bit embarrassing, but I had a great time.
They were playing some Pharrell covers, so we kind of got down. It's fine.
True.
It's fine. Don't worry. Just look away if it bothers you. But yeah, you guys should come to Art Walk. It's the first Wednesday of every month, and every quarter we open a new gallery exhibit in our Jax Makerspace Gallery, which is on the first floor of the main library. And last month we opened our exhibit Ties and Knots, Weaving Narratives of Northeast Florida.
Yes, it is an incredible exhibit. It's unlike any of our others, I would say. There are, quilt type canvas pieces hanging on the wall. There's these beautiful, what did she call it? Like almost chicken wire, like very whimsical sculptures. And we got to talk to a couple of the artists that are in the show.
Yeah, there's even some fashion design kind of stuff. And I think there's a chair down there that's embroidered and really interesting stuff that you don't ordinarily see in a gallery setting. So it's a really unique exhibit and we're lucky to have it here. That exhibit runs through January 24th and we talked to 3 of the artists in that exhibit. We talked to Stephanie Kafkoulis, Jefferson Streeter, and Tracy Mims.
Indeed, and they are all local artists working in the textile field, and we have some wonderful interviews with them, so I hope that you will enjoy them.
And these 3 artists are doing very different work from one another. They are all in the textile field, but when you come and see them at the main library, which I know you all will, obviously, if you haven't already, you'll notice how truly different these 3 artists work within this medium.
Indeed, and it created this gorgeous exhibit to have everyone such different styles. It's pretty cool.
So to start us off, we're going to have Jefferson Streeter. Jefferson, thanks for coming on our show tonight.
Thank you.
So you're not originally from Jacksonville, correct?
No, originally from upstate New York, spent a little time in Maryland, spent a little time in Virginia. But Jacksonville is where I call home.
Okay. How'd you end up here?
We'll never leave again.
Okay.
Just my parents moving. Upstate New York is upstate New York, and definitely wanted a fresh start, and everybody picked here.
Very cool. And so your work in the show and your work in general is very large-scale crochet work, correct?
Yep.
So what first drew you toward crocheting? I mean, we got to admit, it's pretty unusual to hear of a dude crocheting and really owning it. So tell us about that.
This was back in grade school. So I've been crocheting for about 15 years. So it was just basically a way to, connect with my Nana. So every time I would wake up, she would be outside crocheting, on her porch. And I'm like, man, I would really like to just, even try that or even sit down and be able to talk to her for a little bit. And then one thing led to another. And, 15 years later, you have large scale crochet projects.
That's so cool. Yeah. So what kind of things would your Nona, you said? Mm-hmm. What kind of things would she make?
So she's made us everything. All our Christmas stockings for this year are all made from her. She passed away a couple of years ago, so it's definitely something good to pass on. It's something I want to pass on to my kids. But of course, blankets and scarves and everything you can possibly make. She's made dresses for dolls for my sisters and everything in between.
I bet she was disappointed when you guys moved to Jacksonville because you don't really need all those things as much as you did in upstate New York.
Well, the funny thing is, that time that I spent in Maryland, that's where she lived. So I would leave my house, head to her house. I would crochet a project about halfway in it. She would go take a nap. And by the time she woke up, I would have something finished for her, and she would just be like, "Oh, thank you so much." Just a little Italian lady,
Oh, my gosh. I know she was so proud.
Oh, my gosh. She was just, ecstatic.
So funny. That's like me with fishing, though. It's like I did it to hang out with my grandpa and my dad, and it was just something, I didn't always love it. I grew to love it later, but yeah, it's just one of those things that you kind of pick up just to spend time, and it ends up being something that you could pass on.
Yeah, it's one of those, you know what I mean? I'm like a sixth grader, and I'm like, I really want to hang out with my grandmother. You know, there's not a lot of people like that, you know, and it's definitely good to pick up things that the older generation, you know, wants to pass down. You know, my Nana wanted to make sure that somebody was going to pick it up, and I have 4 sisters, and, you know, no one crocheted. And then now that, you know, we're a little bit older, I got a couple of sisters that do it, but, you know, I was the only person that picked it up.
That's so interesting. And you've sort of taken this very traditional craft of crocheting and made it more modern by making it bigger and making it take up a whole wall. What led you to make such large pieces with your crochet work?
So originally, Jax's Rad was doing their 1-year anniversary party. So I said, I really want to make something crocheted for it.
And first of all, tell us a little bit about Jax's Rad for the listeners who don't know what that is.
So Jax's Rad was started by Ainsley Randall. So it's basically just a page that highlights local artists, entrepreneurs, bands, I mean, everything in between, just on a smaller, you know, more connected scale. And it highlights them to, I think they have about 10,000 followers now. They just hit 10,000, so it's good for them. But I definitely wanted to make something for them, and originally it was going to be a yarn bomb because they were going to, I think, do it at Intuition. So it was going to be right next to where, you know, there was a fence, and I could just put it up on the fence and it would be fine. And then they switched locations, so I was like, I still want to do it. How am I possibly going to, you know, be able to get this thing done? So I was like, why don't I just use, you know, chicken wire and then just frame the whole thing, and then every event you have, I can just bring it out and it's good to go. But it was one of those things, it's like, you know, 2 a.m. at Waffle House, and you just spark an idea, and it's something that no one else is doing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know, desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes,
right.
Or creative measures.
That's exactly what it was.
Interesting.
And the event was at, I can't remember where it was, but it was on the second floor, and you only had so much space, and you know, if it's on the second floor, you can't do anything outside because no one's going to see it. So it's exactly what you were saying. I mean, you know, you got to do something. I want to do something. Let me try this, and it ended up working out.
Did it feel like a daunting task at first to crochet something that large?
Oh, 100%. Well,
because what were the dimensions of that particular piece?
That one was 10 feet by 8 feet.
Woo, that's huge.
So it's a foot bigger than the one in there, but it was definitely, I mean, I crocheted one letter and I'm like, wow. And then I crocheted the whole thing and I'm like, okay. I'm like, how am I going to do the background? I mean, this is going to be impossible, you know? So we do the background and it's just massive, and then you're just crocheting, just weaving the entire chicken wire, you know, up and down, and it's just, you know, luckily, you know, everything turned out really well and it looks great and she loved it. And, you know, it's good to do something for, you know, a local person that's highlighting, you know, other people around the community. So
I remember seeing it on Jax's Rad's Instagram story and just being like, what is that? Is that yarn? That's crazy. Yeah, it really pops the way other things just don't.
Yeah,
so
I still have friends that, because I put Bold City Brochet as like my Instagram, and they'll look at it and be like, oh, so what is that? Because in some pictures you can't tell that it's crochet, and no one crochets like that. So they just look at it and they're like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, yeah, I crocheted it. When they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, no, I crocheted the thing. They're like, you got to be kidding me. I thought that was like painted.
Right, because we think of crochet as like mittens and
very
small scale baby shoes and things like that. Yeah.
But I love it. Like, I almost want to go out there and take away that, you know, don't touch sign, because like I love that. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that you can just walk up and just be like, whoa. Like, you know what I mean? Touching it, stroking the furry wall, or whatever kids say nowadays.
And it's clear that your work caught on because you were you hired by Yelp to make their logo for their party?
Maddie contacted me earlier in the year. I can't remember where it was, but it wasn't too far after the Jax's Rad project, and he said, I would love for you to do one for our storybook soiree. And I said, absolutely. You know, I'll do as much as I can. Obviously, I don't know if I'll be able to do it that big with the time frame. So ended up working out well. It's actually the same frame as the one out there. I just cut the Yelp off of it.
Oh, okay.
Because, I think I only had around a month to do this one. So I was just on a little deadline, but it ended up working out perfect. He loved it. Everybody took pictures with it. And so I think that's what I might get into. I'm not really sure. I'm at a crossroads. Do I want to go just strictly art side and just make, beautiful things where I can be creative and, play by my own rules, or, go logos, do stuff for businesses and go that route.
Interesting. So was this, your work in the gallery is much more on the artistic side? You really got to play jazz, and it's this beautiful, like, abstract portrait, I guess I would say. So is that the first piece you've done along those lines?
First piece.
Wow. So we're really seeing a first in the gallery. That's so cool.
This is your first actual, like, exhibition as well, right?
Very first, yep.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Looks great.
Very, very cool. Yeah.
I think your piece is almost kind of the epitome of what this show is. It's weaving narratives of Northeast Florida, but it's also taking, these traditional methods and turning them into modern techniques. And that's exactly what you do with your crochet, this thing that we think of as my grandmother knitting, you know, until this, like, beautiful piece that's in a formal gallery.
Yeah. And it was very funny because, when I did the Yelp, I feel, every project that I've done and the 3 that I've done, everyone leads to the other. So I did the Jax's Rad one, then Yelp contacts me, and then I come in here immediately when I put it up. Shawana came up and she goes, "Get out. You gotta be kidding me. This is incredible." She goes, "We have an expedition coming up. Please give me your contact info. I'll send you everything. Let me know if you can do it. It's short notice, I know, but I mean, she gave me an extra week on the deadline. I mean, she goes, "We need this." And it's exactly, as soon as I was reading through it, I'm like, okay, like weaving, check, knots, check, traditional things in, an abstract way, check. I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And especially for my first art exhibit, I'm like, hopefully they're as tailored as this one,
Well, it's definitely a shoe-in. Yeah, we love having it on our walls. We asked this at the end of all of our interviews. We want to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a firefighter, but that didn't last very long.
Notable. And now you are what'd you call yourself? A brochet?
Bold City Brochet.
I love that.
I love that.
And that's your Instagram name?
It is. And it's funny, too, because I was on Reddit this week, and I finally uploaded the photos of my last projects. And somebody on the subreddit was like, there's a brochet, like it's on Reddit. Like, you can go to it. I said, get out. So I go to the subreddit, and it's literally nothing but men crocheting. I said, this is
it's
unreal.
Your community.
Unreal. But yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Very cool.
Well, thank you so much. We love your piece here, and thank you for coming on our show
much.
tonight.
Appreciate it.
Stephanie Kafkalis, thank you so much for joining us today here at Art Walk.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about you. How long have you lived in Jacksonville?
On and off since 2002.
Okay. Where are you from?
Chicago.
Wow. What brought you to Jacksonville?
My parents moved, and I wasn't making good enough grades in school, so I had to come with.
Oh, no. It's a punishment to be here.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Okay. And tell us a little bit about your art and what it is that you do.
So I don't specifically only work in textiles. I'm more of a process artist, and I work on several different projects at the same time. So I'll choose a material or find a material and just kind of start experimenting with it. And screen, which is one of the ones I used for this project, kind of stood out to me, and I've recently started working with it. So
yeah, and the works that you create with this screen is just like these beautiful, like, colorful, whimsical installations.
I call them fluminous.
Fluminous.
Ooh.
Fluminous.
How did you derive that term?
I went on the internet to a website that you can make up words, and I put a bunch of different words in.
No way.
that I used to describe it, and I was like, let's come up with a different one.
That is it.
Fluminous.
Fluminous.
It's like, it's a word you have to whisper, right?
Fluminous. I don't know. I feel like you got to be like fluminous.
Okay.
It is. It's definitely an airy word.
I like it.
I like it.
Yeah, they're definitely very fluminous. So you just found the screen, and like, how did these come about? Like,
They just kind of came about. I start seeing what I can do and experimenting, putting chemicals on it or using it with other materials that I find, and it just kind of happened. That's it. It's like a happy accident.
wow. And you recently, is this the first time that you've exhibited your fluminous pieces?
This is the second time.
Okay.
So the first time was at the Jacksonville Airport installation last year.
So what was that like to have a show in the airport?
That was a lot of fun. It was definitely very different, but it was a lot of fun to work with Jen Murray, I think is her name, and install the show there. She's an amazing person.
God, millions of people see that walking through the airport.
Yeah, right. There's no better place to reach new viewers of your work than an
And
airport.
it was kind of like hidden because the way the gallery is there, it's like a hallway, and then it has like a right turn, a corner, and like a little space. And so mine kind of peeked around the corner, so you had to go into the gallery all the way down and around the corner to see it.
I see.
So
It's like one of those places. Like our gallery is not just an art gallery, we're in a library.
Yeah.
So it's like you walk around, don't expect to always, come across all this beautiful art. I think that's kind of the same with the airport. You're just a public place. You're going somewhere that you have to be or need to be. And then you come across all this beautiful art. I think that's great.
Heck yes, public art is the best art.
Art is accessible for all. And you are also an adjunct professor at your alma mater, UCF.
that's correct.
Tell us, how do you think instructing young artists has impacted you as an artist yourself?
I teach and they teach me. So I learn from them just as much as they learn from me. At least I hope that they learn from me. But they're always bringing new artists to the table. They're always bringing new ideas, and I'm trying to open up their minds as well. And so it's a give and take with the class and the dynamic of it.
And tell us about the class that you teach. What's it about?
It's called Art as Interface, and it explores artists and movements and different genres and materials. So we talk about women in art and installation art. Is fashion considered art? Why or why not? And I like to start off the class with the all-time question, what is art? To kind of give a basis for talking about art, since that's what we're doing for the class. So
what are some of the answers to that question?
A lot of it is very emotional based. So, and it's always subjective. Do I like it or not? The real, answer that I'm looking for is intention. Because, everybody says, well, anything can be considered art. Absolutely. But is it intended to be art? So, this table that we're sitting at, can it be art? Absolutely. Is it intended to be art right now? No, not really.
That is interesting. Because I went to the Dolly Museum in St. Petersburg recently, and they had a Duchamp exhibit with the pot and all of his that are seemingly just ordinary objects, but the intention is that it is
exactly
art at the time.
And for
Didn't
that,
think about it like that.
It was revolutionary at that time. So that's why he was such a big deal.
Yeah. And who are some of the artists that inspire and influence you?
The one that I started off with is Jackson Pollock. His art just really resonated with me, as simplistic as it is. But the fact that he was defying what was, social norms and the norms for the art world at the time. So I kind of looked into artists more like that. And then the idea of just working with materials and process and experimenting with art, that really resonated with me. So other artists like Linda Banglis, Tara Donovan are some of the artists that I really admire. I look into their work. They inspire me a lot.
Are there any, do you have any favorite books you want to share with us?
Dr. Seuss. No.
That's a great pick. That is
literary
a great pick.
giant.
Yeah.
There's a Walk It in my pocket. No.
You can't go wrong with that.
Art and Fear is a really good book. Whenever I'm kind of at a standstill with my art, feeling down, not inspired, I kind of pull out the book, and it's real thin, super easy read, and it just kind of helps get you into a better headspace. Yeah. So it's a great book.
Do you think it's inspired any of your art?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Because it helps kind of motivate you a little bit more.
Perfect. And we like to ask this at the end of all of our interviews. We want to know, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a ballerina teacher and an archaeologist.
Wow.
All at the same time.
Yeah. Of course. And then it evolved into a music teacher. And now I'm an art teacher. So I stayed within the arts medium. I just, kind of changed.
Yeah. That's awesome. We have some ballerinas here tonight, actually.
Maybe
they'll let you jump in.
No, I'm good on that.
We could live out a dream tonight.
I don't think my knees would like me very much if I
But
tried.
if you intend it to be art, it can be performance art.
It could,
Yes.
absolutely.
Beautiful expression. Well, thank you so much for coming on Completely Booked today, and congratulations on your work in the show.
Thank you so much. It's an amazing show. I love it.
Tracy, thank you so much for coming on our show tonight.
You're welcome.
And tell us a little bit about you first. Are you originally from Jacksonville?
I was born and raised in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is that little piece of Florida that you see on the map that hangs off a peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I grew up.
Okay, and what brought you to Jacksonville?
Well, after I graduated college and left grad school, my husband was born and raised in Jacksonville, so that's what brought me here.
Okay.
Right.
And how long have you been in Jacksonville?
Over 25 years.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you consider Jacksonville home?
Well, it's home now.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about your pieces. You have these beautiful quilts that tell a story in themselves. Tell us a little bit about your quilts.
Well, first of all, I don't consider them quilts. They're paintings. I consider them paintings on fabric or mixed media. Those are both kind of narrative because that's the style that I work in. The one I call the academic, that's a very large quilt. And at the time when I started doing these, I've had people come up to me and make comments like, you should, promote yourself as a self-taught artist because you would be more readily acceptable in the art world being a African-American female as one who is self-taught as opposed to one who has gone the traditional academic route of college and graduate school, that it would be more accepted. And so my response was, kind of a rebellious response because sometimes I'm artist, sometimes I'm activist. And that's why I did that piece. And if you get close up on it, you'll see I have put some wording on there that says, I am not ashamed of being trained. So yes, I have that artistic background. Yes, I have that training. And I think that all goes into making me who I am, So I have no problem with saying, yes, I am a trained artist. So that's what that particular piece was about.
Okay. How did that make you feel that people thought that you would be more perceived as an artist by saying you were self-taught?
It made me feel, kind of bad. Like, I've worked really hard. And it also made me feel like, just to work harder to disprove that, because I see the art world and I see institutional racism. And yes, there are African-American artists who have achieved great things, but when I look at them in retrospect, a lot of them have adapted a more naive style than what they're capable of to be more accepted. And that's the way I see it. There are very few African-American artists that you can roll off the top of your tongue that paint in a very academic or high realism style. There are a few, and it's becoming more prominent, but there was a time when it was very difficult to push through barriers and be seen and be exhibited just based on that for Black artists.
And I was looking at your quilt, and it does look like a kind of a self-portrait as
It
well.
is,
Yeah.
yes.
And, I think that's great that you said that you're just yourself as an artist. You're not trying to be anyone else. That's awesome.
And the second quilt I called By and By, at the time that I was making that one, my grandfather passed away. And so, the pattern in that is a bow tie quilt, which is, kind of one of the quilt patterns that was kind of a masculine representation. And so that's where that particular one came from. And the woman in there was my grandmother. And, I just thought about when I was making that, how their presence in my life was a game changer, for me growing up, the way that I did, in my particular background. And having them in my life really made a difference in the person I became.
And tell us all about the fabric that you use in your quilts.
I use all kinds of fabric. I find fabric at a thrift store. I recycle clothing, Joann's, commercial fabrics. Some of it I have dyed myself. And there's also canvas. One thing that I wanted to do when I created those, I did not want them to be looked at as crafts or something, a tapestry that, might end up in the thrift store or something like that. But I wanted them to be looked at as fine art, as paintings. And so I did incorporate the use of canvas, gessoed canvas in them. The figures are on canvas. So that was the reason for me doing that.
How do you attach the canvas?
I hand stitch it.
Okay.
On top of the quilt, on top of the piece quilt.
That's what I was thinking. And we talked to another artist tonight too who really embodies what this exhibit is about, is taking these really traditional methods and turning them into fine art. And that's, was that your intention?
That was definitely my intention, yes.
Okay.
So, when I think about traditional quilt making, it's a beautiful art form, but I wanted to do something to transform what I did into a fine art.
And who are some of the artists and people in your life that inspired you as an artist?
Oh, gosh. There are so many. Charles White, Elizabeth Catlett. There's a really great quilt maker who's doing things right now, Bisa Butler. I don't know if you are familiar with her work. Also, as far as quilt makers and painters go, Faith Ringgold. So those are some people who inspire me. And looking at my work, you can probably see influence from some of those people if you saw a range of the work that I do.
And are there any books that have inspired you as an artist?
Yes. If I think specifically, there's a book of the collection of Bill Cosby, of the artwork that he had. And it had, most of the artists some of the artists that I've just mentioned, their works in there. And I just kind of flipped through that book. Also, I had a collection of poems by Langston Hughes, so I'm not always inspired by visual. Sometimes it's words. And so that book is in tatters, that one that I have, that I go through all the time to, for inspiration.
That means it's well loved.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times, these type of traditional, more traditional art forms are kind of passed down. Were there anyone in your family who did quilts or sewing?
Well, one of my dad's sisters was very, very talented with the sewing machine. Like, she made all kinds of things. Like, she would take an old pair of jeans and it would become a handbag, or it would become some kind of craft item. And she still does that. My grandmother, my mother, all the women in my family. And so as far as the sewing part goes, I'm self-taught. So I just kind of watched them and just, got on the machine and toyed around and did things. So I that's how I learned to sew.
That's awesome. My mom is a huge quilter, and she taught my sister how, and now she always says my sister's better than her. My sister has, a lot of time to do it. And
right.
It's just cool to see them get to connect in that way.
Yes, I tell my students, poor is the pupil who does not surpass the master. So the student should become better than the person who taught them.
All right, that's a sign of a good teacher.
Yes.
For sure. And we ask this at the end of all of our interviews. We want to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a fashion model.
Oh my gosh.
I did. I wanted to walk the runways. I wanted to be a fashion model.
That is awesome.
Yes.
Did you ever get into any clothes making? Did you ever make?
I did. Oh yes, definitely. I've made clothes. I've made wedding dress. I've made all kinds of clothing. Yes.
My grandmother was a huge sewer too, and we would like just take her old scraps and make clothes out of it and then do runways. Oh, that's great memories. Well, Tracy, your work is beautiful. Thank you so much for allowing us to show it here in the Jax Makerspace Gallery.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on our show tonight. We love our local artists here at the library, and not just the main library, at all of our libraries. Did anyone know that all 21 of our libraries have permanent public art?
It's true.
You
should go check them out. Every single library is kind of like a mini museum that way.
There's something new in each of them, and you should definitely check them out. Our Ties and Knots exhibit that we have right now is really cool because it's kind of textiles is like more of a traditional form of art, but this exhibit kind of explores how it moves into the modern world.
Yeah, and it sort of blurs that line between art and craft.
Right.
And really turns the craft into a fine art, which you don't get to see every day.
Exactly. You said that perfectly. That's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
Hurley.
I appreciate that.
That was perfect. So make sure you come down to the main library and see all this beautiful artwork through January 24th. And then get ready for the next exhibit. We got a new one every 3 months, you guys. So it's always something new.
Beginning of February, we'll have a new one. We'll announce that someday.
Indeed.
Soon. Someday,
you'll know eventually.
You'll learn about it, yeah. And again, that's at the main library. And while you're here, if you don't have a library card, you go visit that circulation desk. It is right around the corner from the gallery. Get yourself a library card, people. My goodness, if you have not done that by now, I don't know what you're doing listening to our show.
Yeah. Save some money. We have ebooks, we have audiobooks, we have movies.
Yeah. A new year is coming up. You're probably thinking about your budget a lot.
Indeed.
Better spending practices, better environmental practices. Being a library user is the most environmentalist thing you can do. Wow. I believe.
I agree.
Yes. The most. More so than recycling. This is another podcast episode, though. We'll talk about that later.
Save the planet, you guys. Get a library card.
Exactly. And while you're at it, please subscribe to our show, rate us, and review us very highly.
Indeed. Follow us at Jax Library on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Every single platform in the world. We're also online at jaxpubliclibrary.org/podcast.
And we are taking a quick survey of you beautiful listeners. So let us know what you think. If you love this podcast, if you hate it, we want to know. Go ahead. There's a link on our podcast page on our website. It says, take our survey.
With an exclamation point.
Important to note.
So it's more like, take our survey!
Yay!
Take our survey! Please! This podcast was produced by Brian Thomas, a.k.a. BT, a.k.a.
Producer Brian.
Goodbye.